Welcome to my tutorial for this Alice in Halloween album. If you would like to see more of a detailed close-up and show and tell type view, then make sure you check out the link to my walkthrough video in the description box below. All of the papers in this album were printed from digital images that I purchased on Etsy, so I will have a link to 3 of the main files that I have used on this album in the description box below. I will have more of an extensive list also from the other images that I've used. And then I will also have a link to a few of the products that I've used. I'm not sponsored or designing for anybody. That's just there for your benefit. In this tutorial, I explain what type of paper I've used, how I printed it out, the sizing, how I've collaged some of the images in my Photoshop, and basically I try to tell you everything that you would need to know to recreate this album for yourself. I take you step by step on how to create the pages, on how to attach your spine. This album has a soft spine with a floating hinge, and that may seem intimidating, but it's really actually very easy to make. I think it's a lot easier than using the hidden hinge system. So I think once you give this a try, you're really going to enjoy it and enjoy the process. Because I am trying to be as thorough as possible, and because I do have to explain a lot about the process of printing the papers and using the digital imagery throughout the album, it does tend to make this tutorial a bit long. So I hope you will bear that in mind. And having said that, let's go ahead and get started. And I do want to mention that I do a lot of experimenting before I print out my papers. I test the papers that I'm using, I test the inks, I test the different settings on my printer and my computer before I actually print out all my pages. So I'm just going to tell you what I did, and you'll just have to, experiment on your own and do what's best for you. Because this particular paper is blacks and oranges, they're just really rich colors and vibrant. It's hard to get that out on paper like this, and so I did end up having to go with a presentation paper. It's a high quality paper that I got at Office Depot. It's by Hewlett Packard, and it is called presentation paper. It's quite expensive, but I found that when you want your blacks to be black and your oranges to be actually orange, sometimes you need to go that route. So most of the paper, in fact all of them but one, are printed out on that presentation paper, and on the setting on my computer, when it asks what type of paper, I just put plain. And that seemed to work for most of the papers. A few of them, like the ones where I manipulated the digital images on top of another paper, that one worked better with the setting at high resolution paper instead of plain paper. And like this one here, and some of the purples worked better on high resolution, and then this one here came out really red until I put that on high resolution, and then it came out more purple. So I did have to do quite a bit of experimenting on some of these, and typically I don't have to go to that much trouble. It's just these are such rich, vibrant colors that it does take a little bit more of that. And then the one paper I did not print out on presentation paper was this one. It just kept coming out red no matter what setting I put it on. And so finally I pulled out an ivory cardstock and printed that out on the plain paper setting, and it came out more orange, and so that's what I had to do on that one. Also, I'm using an inkjet printer, and sometimes when that ink, even though the paper's dry, if you're using wet glue, it can you know, you can maybe smudge a little bit. So what I do, I use a spray on top of the papers. I let them dry for a few minutes out of the printer, then I'll take them out to the garage and I'll spray a set of them, and the spray takes maybe 3 minutes to dry, just to a light spray over the top. I don't have to saturate it or anything like that, and it'll have a little bit of a gritty feel to it, but at least you won't have to worry about the inks coming off. It's called Treehouse. I get it at Hobby Lobby, and I use the gloss. I find that the matte tends to dull these rich, vibrant colors that you've worked so hard to get, and the high gloss is just a little too much. So I will try to remember to put a link to that below as well. And so anyway, good luck with printing your papers. I wish I had a one solution fits all on that, but I've just found that I have to do different things every single time I go to print out an album. So good luck with that, and let's get started on the tutorial. Okay, so we need to make our album pages, and so you're going to need 4 pieces of paper that are 7 3/4 by 5 3/4, and you're going to put your paper across the top at 7 3/4, and then you're going to score at 1/2 inch and 7 1/4. So you do all 4 of those, and then you're going to need 3 pieces of paper that are 6 3/4 long by 1.5 inches wide, and you're going to score at 1/2 inch and 1 inch on all 3 of those. And then you're going to need 4 pieces of paper that are 6 3/4 by 5 3/4. And so we're just going to go ahead and burnish these folds on the ends. And while you're burnishing, you might as well go ahead and burnish all your hinges. And okay, and then you're just going to set all those aside. Okay, so now we're going to take the 5 3/4 by 6 3/4 paper, and we're going to glue the edges down on top of those hinges. And I'm just doing a dry fit here to make sure that everything's lining up and making sure I don't need to trim that piece a little bit. And so then I'm going to go ahead and glue all 4 pages. So now I'm just going to run a string of glue on one side of the pages just to make that a pocket. So I'm going to go ahead and run my glue, and then I'll hold it up so that you can see what I'm doing, but that will just make this whole entire page one large pocket page. So I've just got my string of glue there, and I'm going to close that down, and then I'll do that with the rest of the 3, and then we'll have pocket pages. Alright, so these are binding strips, and so let's see, which way do I want to do this? Okay, I'm going to do it this way. So I'm going to unfold my strip here, so I have the, looks like a little U shape, and I'm going to unfold that this way, and then I'm going to go ahead and glue that on top of there, and I don't want to go over that score line, but I'm going to get as close to it as I can without going over. So I'm just doing a dry fit first to make sure everything's lining up okay. And you just want to make sure that the glued side is on the edge of that hinge there, and that your pocket is on this side. for the opening of your pocket anyway. Okay, so now I'm just going to turn it around and do the same thing. I'm going to make sure that the opening of my pocket's on this side. And let me just do a dry fit. So I'm going to, I find it easier to fold, I don't know if you can see this, folding my pages this way, and then I'm going to go ahead and fold my hinge this way. So I have, so this is the U, inside of the U, and the outside of the U is what I call it. And so I'm just going to fold this outside piece like this, and I'm going to line it up with that page right there. So I'm just doing a dry fit. So now I have something that looks like this. And so now I'm going to just open that up and glue this one on, and I'm just going to make sure that the opening of the pocket's on this right. And I'm just going to do a dry fit again. Okay, so same thing, I'm going to take my little binding hinge, and I'm going to just open up one side and keep one side folded. And then I'm going to fold my book open like this. Or I don't know if that, not fold it open, but just kind of fold it over like that. And then I'm going to line these two folded pieces together, just like I did before. So now I have my base of my album all put together, and so it doesn't look like much, but now we'll get started making all our flips and fold outs and all that stuff. Alright, so now that we have our album put together, we need to start making some of these fold outs and tip ins and things like that. So the first one we're going to do is on the very first page, and so you're going to need a piece of paper that is 4 inches wide and 6 3/4 inches tall. And you're going to go ahead and score at 1/2 inch. And I've already scored mine. And just fold that up there. And now this is the time that you're going to want to punch any decorative edges that you want. So on this one, I'm using the Martha Stewart spiderweb punches. There's a corner punch and then there's a border punch, and I use both of them. So this is this piece right here, and so we're going to go ahead and get that in here. So on the very first page, we're just going to take that folded edge and glue it to the book. So, and we are going to be using magnets. Okay, so I like to use both glue and tape when I'm putting in my magnets, and so we have our first page here, and then this is the fold in, and so I'm going to put my magnet right there in the middle, and so I'm just going to put a drop of glue somewhere close to the middle. It doesn't have to be exact. And then I put a piece of tape over that just to kind of hold it in place till that glue dries. And then, let's see, where is my, I like to take a piece of paper and put it over the other one so I can lift it off really easy. You'll see what I mean in just a minute. So I'm putting the glue on the other magnet and then folding it over. And see, now I can just hold this paper down and lift that up without worrying about lifting up the magnet. Because it'll want to go with this one when you lift it up, and then you won't be able to, then you'd have to wait forever for it to dry. So anyway, I was just gonna put a piece of tape right there on that one, and so those will dry and we'll be good to go. So okay, so now we're going to make the pocket that is right here. And for that, and I've already pretty much started it, but you're going to need a piece of paper that is 6 3/4 by, what did I do here? 2 3/4, and then you're going to score one side, one long side at 1/2 inch, and then score these sides at 1/2 inch on each side, and then basically just folding these over. And then I cut an angle there, that little square off that's formed when you make your square lines. I'm just cutting that off at an angle and then folding these 3 sides, and then I'm just going to do a dry fit and make sure it's not too long. I don't want it to go too close to that score line, because then it'll have a hard time. The pages will have a hard time folding. So I'm going to flush it more to the right than I would next to the score line, and so that's going to work. So I'm going to go ahead and glue that down. Okay, so now we need to make this tip in right here, and so you're going to need a piece of paper that is 4 1/8 by 4 5/8. And you're going to put your paper where it's 4 5/8 along the top, and then you're going to score that at 1/2 inch. Okay, so now I'm just going to eyeball it, and then I'm going to glue this edge right here to the center of the page. And if you're really particular about it, you can go ahead and measure your center, but I'm not going to worry about it too much. Okay, so we're going to do the magnets the same as we did before. I'm going to glue this one on the inside of this tip in or fold out, whatever you like to call it. Okay, so now I need to talk a little bit about the design papers before we can move on. And all of these papers on this layout are from the Orange Gothic collection, except for this witch background paper here. This is from the Halloween Alice collection. And of course, these Clipart images are also with that collection. And so what I did when I printed out my papers was I told my printer I wanted them printed out 8 by 10, and then I have a little box that I can click. It says fit to page next to the box. I click on that and it sizes my image down to 8 by 8. So that's what I've done on all my papers, with a couple exceptions, this being one of them. So this one here, I just hit that I wanted to print 4 by 6, and then I hit fit to page, and it came out a 4 by 4 image, which was the exact size that I needed. So in my Photoshop, what I did was I made sure my page was sized to an 8 by 8, and then I added this clip art to the spiderweb paper in the center, and then I just printed it out 8 by 8, and then I just measured it and cut so that it would be centered. And so I'll give you the measurements of the cuts that I made in just a minute. And then on this one here, same thing, I made sure that the paper was 8 by 8, and then I added the moon, then I added the Halloween witch, and then I added the little bats. It's the same bat, I just sized one smaller than the other. Now the bats, I can't remember if that's in the Alice Halloween or if that was in my Halloween clip art. So I'm not sure about that. I can't remember. But then when I printed this one out, even though I made it an 8 by 8, when I printed it out, I said I wanted a 4 by 6, like I said before, and then it hit fit to page, and it printed out 4 by 4. So let me give you the measurements of the papers, and then we'll go from there. So the background papers on the main page are 5 5/8 by 6 5/8, and then this fold out here is 6 5/8 tall and 3 3/8 wide. And then this piece here I did trim down to 3 1/4. Sometimes when you have the paper folding in there, you lose a little bit of room, but I would measure it bigger first and then trim if you need to. And then this pocket here is 5 5/8 by 2 1/8. And this piece here is 4 by 4. Now, I did not print this out to a 4 by 6 and then fit it down to a 4 by 4. And the reason being is because I wanted that size. I didn't want that to be a smaller image than this paper here. So this is just left over from another paper, whether it's this one here or another one. It's just a leftover piece that I've cut 4 by 4 and placed it here. So if you want to size it down, you can. I just wanted that same size of spider web on the paper. And I think that's it. Now we're going to talk about our spider web corners. So I used the Martha Stewart punch here, and so wherever I needed the corners cut on the cardstock, I did that. And then on the design paper, which is cut 1/8 of an inch less than the cardstock on all sides, I just went ahead and punched the design paper, and this is just a scrap. It really doesn't fit, but it's good for demonstration purposes. And so you can see I have this one cut and this one's not cut yet. So basically all I'm doing is cutting the spider web off. So where that little spider web design meets that solid paper, I'm just cutting that and cutting the other side. And then I've got 2 little pieces attached to that little semicircle there. And so this is the tricky part, just cutting those off. And mine are not perfect. Some of mine look pretty bad if you really look at them close, but overall no one's really going to notice if it's not perfect. So I wouldn't stress about it too much. And then of course you just line that up right there, and it looks pretty good. So anyway, all right, one other thing I wanted to mention before I go on, and I do apologize that I had placed all the papers in. I actually wasn't going to do a tutorial on this one, and I had a request to do a tutorial for this, so it's kind of, you know, I'm kind of in between and after the fact, but at the same time. But I do want to mention that when you're placing your design papers down and then you're punching your corners, just be really aware of the orientation of your paper. For example, on this piece here, because I want the corners on the bottom, so I need to make sure that I punch my design paper, the corners on the bottom here. But when I flip this up, now this paper, it doesn't matter because this one goes every which way, but if I had a paper here that had a top and a bottom, I'd want to make sure that I remember to punch the corners of the design paper on the top. Okay, so does that make sense? So if this were on this side, then it would have been punched on the top and not the bottom. Okay, I hope that makes sense. And the same thing with the sides. You just want to make sure that you're aware of which side it's going in. So you just, on this one, you want to make sure that you're punching your corners on the left side. And now if you're doing a design on this side that it matters, you want to make sure that, you know, they're punched on the right. And just keep in mind your orientation of your design papers when you're punching those corners. Alright, so now we need to make our policy envelopes, and this is probably the most difficult part of the book. And so you're going to cut 2 pieces of paper that are 3 1/4 by 7 3/4, and then you're going to have it on the long side at the top, and you're going to score one side at 1/2 inch, and then you're going to turn it over and then put it on the opposite side and score at 1 1/2 and 1 5/8. Okay, and you'll do that with both of them. And then just go ahead and burnish those edges down. And you'll see why I flipped it over in a minute. I like to fold on the ridges. It's just easier for me. I think the fold comes out better. But they're going to be, this piece needs to be folded in opposite directions on each side. Okay, so now I have this one done. So this is the time that you want to line these up in your book and make sure that the papers fit. You don't want it to go, it should come a little bit less than that score line, maybe about 1/8 of an inch less than from your score line, and that's where it should be. If you just get it really too close, it's really hard to close your book, and it's going to cause you heartache in the end. So I think on my book here, I've decided I'm just going to do a simple round punch, and so I'm going to go ahead and do this one right now, and I'll go back and do the others later, but it's really hard to do this after it's in the book, so I need to do this one now. Okay, so now I'm just going to place magnets on the top flap of the policy envelopes, and I'm just going to do it in the same way that I've done previously. And so those magnets are just going on the inner flap of the policy envelope. I'm going to be placing larger magnets on the back of the policy envelope towards the top flap, and I'm just going to put those on the same way that I've been doing before. For the next part of the envelope, you're going to need 2 pieces of paper that are 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and you're going to place the top of the paper where it's 4 1/4, and you're going to score 1/2 inch on each side. And you're going to do that with both of those. Okay, so I'm using a 1-inch circle punch to punch little notches in my paper here, and so I've made little marks on my circle punch on the back that mark the center of the circle and not quite half, because that's about where I am going to punch the notch. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and find the center Then I'm going to line that up with the center mark on my punch, and then I'm going to line it up to the side there where I want, as far in as I want that punch to go. And then I've got my notch punch, and so I'm going to do that on the other one as well. And I've already lined this up and made sure it fits. I'm going to go ahead and glue this down. So now I need to put my other magnet on, the little closure. And when you do this, you do want to make sure that your 1/8 inch is where it should be. If it's accidentally folded down this way or folded up this way, it's not going to line up right when you do your lid. So you want to make sure that that 1/8 of an inch is where it should be. One thing that I completely forgot to mention is we do need to close off this bottom part of the policy envelope, and so you've got your little flap here that's going to attach it to the book. So just fold that over and get it out of the way, and then you're just going to put a line of glue, and my glue is wanting to drip. Anyway, you just need a line of glue on the bottom there, and then just go ahead and seal that shut. Now it's ready to be glued in the book. So I've got my policy envelopes glued onto the page, and they are about 1/8 of an inch apart and centered the best I could, and I've got the magnets in, and so this page is just ready to go. Alright, so I make a little template when I'm punching notches in design paper, and I do have an offset like I do in this book here. And what I mean by that is, here's one punched exactly like this one was punched, but when I hold that up and I've got that 1/8 inch offset, it just really curves in too much on those corners there, and I don't like the way it looks. And so what I do is I just kind of draw a little line where I want it to be and cut that out, and then maybe you can see on this one it just has a much better fit and I like it better. So that's what I do. Okay, so I have 3 different design papers on this layout, and I have the little pumpkins from the Halloween Alice collection, and they are on the front and the back of the envelopes. And then I have this Harlequin paper from the Harlequin collection, and this is also on the front and back of these little flaps here, and this is just fussy cut out from scraps of this paper and glued onto there. And then we have this beautiful floral from the Halloween Floral collection. So these back pieces are all the same. They're 5 5/8 by 6 5/8. And then these here are 3 1/8 this way and 5 3/8. And same on all 4 pieces, front and back. And then these are 1 3/8 by 3 1/8. So one thing I did want to mention is that I might have, if I was to do this again, I might change the orientation of this paper here. I was cutting it out thinking that's how it would look in a, if you just had a regular policy envelope, but once it's glued in the page, I think it might have looked good facing top and bottom this way. So just something to think about when you're cutting your papers. All right, for the final layout, you're going to need a piece of paper that is 5 3/4 by 7 1/4. And with that 7 1/4 going across the top, you're going to score at 1/2 inch. And then you're going to need a piece of paper that is 4 1/8 by 6 1/8, and you're going to score it with the 6 1/8 up here. You're going to score at 1/2 inch. And then you're going to need a piece of paper that is 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, and with it across the top like this, you're going to score at 1/2 inch. And then you're going to need a piece of paper that is 4 1/8 by 4 5/8, and you're going to go ahead and score that at 1/2 inch with the 4 5/8 going across the top. And then for the pocket on the opposite page, you're going to need a piece of paper that is 3 1/4 inches, and you're going to score one side at 1/2 inch. And then when you turn it the long ways along the top, you're going to score 1/2 inch on each side, and this paper is 6 3/4. Alright, so now I'm just going to give this a dry fit and make sure that it fits on the page. I just really don't want it to rub on the score line or be too close to there when the album's closed. And so I went ahead and trimmed a little bit off the side, and so now it's looking pretty good. Alright, so now I'm going to check the bottom and see if I need to trim any more off that one. I had taken a little sliver off the bottom as well, and it seems to be looking pretty good. So now I'm just going to check this longest piece of the waterfall and make sure that it fits on this fold out, and it's going to be flush to the left, and I do have an 1/8 of an inch gap on the right, and I'm okay with that. I really don't want it that close to the edge anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and glue all of these pieces together. But first I'm going to round the corners. Alright, so now I'm going to glue this to the center of the fold out, and I'm not too worried about having it exact. I'm just going to eyeball it, and then I'm going to go ahead and glue the entire thing onto the album page. Alright, so I want to have some kind of a ribbon closure for the waterfall, and so on this one here, I'm just going to untie this so I can show you. I went ahead and glued the ribbon onto the back of this fold out here and covered it with this design paper, and so the whole thing just ties right here. I'm not sure even what papers I'm going to be using on this book or what colors or anything, so I'm just not going to put my ribbon closure on it this time. But I am going to go ahead and put a magnet here to hold this fold out to the album. All right, the last thing we have left to do is to add our pocket, and I've already folded the score lines and trimmed the corners here, and so I just need to glue it on. So I'm going to go over the design papers and then I'll go over the measurements. So we have the queen here that is photoshopped onto this purple Harlequin paper, and I did this in an 8x8 print, and then I just trimmed it to a 4x4. Now you could just go ahead and do it 4x4, but the image will come out a little bit smaller like this one. So it just depends on what you want to do. And then this orange spiderweb paper is from the Orange Gothic collection, and this Harlequin paper is also from the Orange Gothic, and this is one of the Halloween florals. The Tweedles are obviously from the Alice and Halloween, and this paper as well with the queen. This is a clip art from the Alice and Halloween, and I just photoshopped it onto the spiderweb paper, printed it out 8x8, and then just trimmed it to size. And another one of the Halloween florals. So all the papers on these 4 pages I cut to 5 5/8 by 6 5/8. These two, of course, on this fold out here had to be trimmed down just ever so slightly. And the pocket here is 5 5/8 by 2 5/8. And all of the waterfall pieces are 4 inches tall. So this one is 4x4. This one is 4 5/8. And this one here is 5 1/2. I would always just measure your waterfall first before you cut the pages, because when you're scoring and cutting all this much, sometimes you lose a little bit in your width, and then no two scoreboards and cutters are the same, so it's just best to do measurement first before you cut, right? So this is going to have a soft spine or a floating hinge. I do have a tutorial for this. It's called my Beginner Soft Spine Album Tutorial. And it's not really just for beginners, because I do teach you different ways to cover your spine and different ways to do the cover on this album. And but it's great for beginners also, because I teach you how to determine the width of your gussets and so on and so forth. So if you've never made an album before and tried to figure out on your own what size to make it and everything, that's very helpful. Anyway, so I'll put a link to that below, and you'll have to check that out. So for this album, you're going to need a piece of design paper that is 1 1/2 by 6 5/8. And I would suggest that you use something darker if it's a dark cardstock, or something lighter if it's a light album. It's only going to be peeking through, but you don't want it to be so much of a contrast on that piece there. This piece here is 3 5/8 by 6 5/8. And you're going to need to make sure that you use a nice quality design paper. I'm using digital paper, so this one's actually printed out on a linen cardstock. And I get my linen cardstock from Country Craft Creations. I really think it's a high quality paper. It doesn't, you can score it and fold it and everything, it just does not tear. and it's great for whatever we're going to be doing next. Like I said, you need to check out the tutorial because I do explain a lot about the different techniques of making your spine. But for this album, we just need a piece of double-sided paper, and because it's going to be attached only on the covers, we will not be gluing this to here, this piece here, okay? Alright, so sometimes when I'm recording a video, I get a bit ahead of myself, and I was just scoring away and scoring away, but on this piece here, with the 3 5/8 along the top, you need to score at 1 inch on each of the long sides. So don't do as I'm doing here, do as I say, score 1 inch on each side, and then in between those 1 inch score lines, then you're going to score every 1/8 of an inch as you see me doing here. So those 1/8 of an inch score lines only need to be in the center part of this paper. I just got talking about the instructions and got a little bit carried away. So this is one of those do as I say, not as I do. Okay, and then what I like to do is I kind of like to put it on the edge of the table and I just pull it through while I'm pushing down with this hand. It just kind of helps give it a curve. All right, this is the time to poke a hole in the center of your spine for a dangle if that is something that you would like to add to your album. So right here I'm just reinforcing those 1 inch score lines before I place the spine on the cover of the album. Alright, so now I'm just going to add the glue between the edge of the paper and that 1 inch score lines, and I'm just going to glue the front cover first, and then I'll just make sure it's centered onto the album. Because it is on an offset, I do have that 1/8 of an inch or 1/16 of an inch black on the edges, and so I'm just going to center this here and make sure that it's fitting, and then I'll go ahead and turn it over and glue it on the other side just between the edge of the paper and that 1 inch score line only, leaving the center of the paper unglued where the hinges are. But you can see why you want a decent cardstock for this part. You could use craft tex, you can use fabric. Anyway, so there you go. We have an album put together. So now I'm going to put the front cover on, and I'm doing a dry fit here just to make sure that it's going to work okay. Make sure I got the right orientation there. And this one is looking just slightly crooked. So I'm just double checking to make sure that it's going to work for me, that if I line up those right edges that it'll be okay. The left side is going to be covered with lace, so it's okay if it's just slightly crooked. I think I can cover a lot of that up, and it seems to be going to be working for me. So this paper is 5 5/8 by 6 5/8. So, as well as the back cover. So yeah, I think this is going to work. So I'm just going to go ahead and glue that on, and I'll be back. Alright, so I'm just going to do a dry fit here and make sure that this is fitting, and it's looking pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and glue this on, and I'll be back. So to design my front cover, I sized my digital canvas to 8 by 8, and then I added this Harlequin paper from the Orange Gothic collection, and then I've added the pumpkins from the Halloween collection, and then the florals are from the Halloween floral collection, and I've just I don't know, just kind of arrange them on there in a way that was pleasing to me. So, and then on the back, I have just the Harlequin printed out in the 8x8. So I never intended to put any kind of ribbon closure on the album, but if I do need something, I can always go ahead and use like a bulldog clip or something. But I don't think it's going to need it, and I just didn't want it to take away from the laces that I'm going to be adding to the album. So I will try to put a title or some kind of a reminder in my video to remind you to put your ribbon closure on now if that's something that you would like to add to your album. So I wanted to show you the lace that I've used on the spine. This is from ReneaBouquets. It's absolutely gorgeous. And I normally would put my lace on this way, but I really needed a straight edge here, so I put it on this way. And so when I cut the first piece, I made sure that it was centered, that my little teardrop points were within the size of the album. And then the second piece, and I don't have another piece to show you, I'll just show you with this little piece here. The second piece, I wanted to make sure that these points went inside of the little triangles there. And I did that for two reasons. The first being I wanted a consistent coverage of black lace on the spine, and the second is that I didn't want a lot of bulk. Because even though this is pretty, I'm still going to be covering that up, and I just didn't want bulky spots here and there on the spine. And then I really needed this straight edge because of this piece here. I didn't want it to be sitting on top of the teardrops. And this I created digitally using all of the 4 collections that I've mentioned previously. And so I sized my digital canvas to 8x8. Then I placed the spider web paper first. Then I added this frame from the Orange Gothic. Then I added various florals from the Halloween floral, and I've, turned some and reversed some and just sized some different just for interest. And then I've added these pumpkins from the Alice in Halloween, and then of course finally the Clipart witch from the Alice in Halloween. And I think this just came out so pretty. I have added some spiders here and there. It's just really hard to see unless you're looking way close, but it just adds a little interest to the overall image. And so anyway, I mounted this onto medium weight chipboard and inked the edges in black. And this is 4.5 by 4.5. The only thing that I can't tell you is how I printed it out 4.5 by 4.5. And I honestly don't remember. Okay, so I painted some of the ribbons and rose trim that I have on my album. And so here's a little piece that's left over. And here's one of the little ribbons, or rose ribbon from this trim right here. And so what I do on these is I just cut the roses apart, and then I just trimmed some of that netting and lace that was on there and underneath the rose. And then I took this patina effect paste, it's the brass, and this is from Finnabair, and it's kind of a coppery, it says brass, but it's a very coppery rust looking color. And so it doesn't have to be this paint, anything that is close to that color of your album, this is pretty dang close. And so I'm just taking my flat brush here and dipping it in the paint, and then I'm going to go ahead and just kind of brush some of it off on the paper towel, and then I'm just going to lightly cover the rose, and for the most part it will just pick up on the edges. If you get a little bit of the paint otherwise it's not a big deal. In fact, it's kind of pretty. So just kind of want to get some few highlights here in this copper paint. And you might want to try brushing it from a couple different sides. And that's it. And the same thing with the ribbon. Just going to get some paint on the end of your brush, kind of wipe off the excess there. And I'm just very lightly painting the lace, and the paint will just show up on those raised ridges, and it just comes out very pretty. So this is how the lace is attached in on the pocket on the second page. And I believe I've got this lace from ReneaBouquets as well. And then I've just taken those little ribbon pieces and attached them to the center of the teardrops. And then before I did that, I actually added the fun fur trim, or the eyelash trim, depending on which brand you use, it's what it's called. And then I also tucked in the end of that little ribbon rose as I was tucking in the eyelash trim, just so that it wouldn't stick out. After I had everything placed on the pocket, I had decided that even though it was pretty, it still needed just a little bit more oomph or bling, and so I added this glitter paste from Bo Bunny. It's in the color Pumpkin, and it's not a paint, it's a glitter, so it's going to go on just a little bit different. And so I would just get some on my paintbrush and then just kind of place the brush on kind of flat like that and tap it down, and then try to get it on the edges the best I could. I think it just came out super, super pretty. And then I also did the same thing to this little pocket watch charm. So first I painted it black, and then I went over it with the patina brass paint, and then I went over it with the glitter paste. And I think it just came out really, really cool, and I love how it ties in with the lace on the other side. Here is just a plastic spider, and I've just put the glitter paste on him as well and glued him right there. And I think it came out so cute. And then on the cover, you can see that I've added those ribbon roses. And then, so you can see that I did the same thing to the roses on the spine. And after I had painted them and attached them to the album, I added the fun fur trim underneath, and I think it just came out super, super pretty. So I decided to add these little teeny spiders to the spine at the very last as I was making my album, and so I just thought I'd show you how I did that really quick. So they're just these little plastic spiders that I get at the Halloween store when they pop up around this time of year. And all I do is take my metallic wax from Prima, and it's the aged brass is what I used. And I really just took my finger and, you know, did that. That's all I did. You may want to have them just really dry really well before you start handling them, because sometimes the wax will just kind of rub off before it dries, but once it's dry, it won't come off. So anyway, oops. So that's all I did, is just rub the wax on there, and then I stuck them along in the spine with the ribbon roses. And when you watch the walkthrough, you'll see the completed look, but it just really came out fantastic. So the last thing I'm going to show you is how to make this belly band here. And I don't know if you can, let me get a better view. There you go. I used this Martha Stewart punch, But I think no matter which punch you use, I think the process is pretty much the same, except for you need to determine the width of your punch. And on this one, it's a 1/2 inch. So what I did is, let me measure this. What I did is when I printed, this is left over from the cover of the album. And what I did is I just cut on the edge of where these little diamond patterns are. And so this might not be an exact measurement. In fact, it's not quite 3/8 of an inch. So what I wanted to add to the width of my cardstock is, it's okay if it goes a little over, because that gives me, you know, some black edging on the sides of this design paper. So I'm going to go ahead and say that's 3/8 of an inch. So I want to add 3/8 of an inch to this twice. So I'm cutting a strip of paper that is 1 3/8. So that's how I determined the width of the cardstock. Now if you have something, you know, that's a 1/4 of an inch or whatever, you need to adjust your measurements according to whatever this ends up being. So if you end up cutting it from a bigger pattern, then you know you have to make those adjustments. I hope that makes sense on how I measured that. And then I'm going to take a strip of paper longer than what I actually need. And then there's little hash marks on this punch, and I'm going to punch my first punch with the second coming from the center, that second little hash mark there. And so I'll go ahead and punch. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to flip it over and put the edge of that paper, the same edge, just flipped over. I'm going to put that on the same hash mark and punch. And then I'm going to just go ahead and punch like you normally would. I would line up this pattern. And for the most part, I have an identical pattern on each side. And you'll notice too that I have this line in the middle, or this straight line right here of the web in the middle, in between the 4. And I'm going to use that as my center, obviously, because that's what it is. And then on this, what I did was I could get at least 4 full diamonds in the strip, and this is 3 1/8. So what I did was I took my ruler and I marked the center on my cutter, and then I didn't actually make a mark. I just found the center on my cutter, and then I just trimmed to 3 1/8 total. So I just trimmed a little bit off this side and a little bit off this side. So then I just inked the edges, and I'm going to line up this center point between the 4 full diamonds, and I'm going to go ahead and glue that on. So I have that glued on to the center there, and let me get these little itty bitties out of the way here and into the trash. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up my trimmer to the edge of this orange paper and just go ahead and cut there. And looks like I need to ink this edge up just a little bit more. I just, a lot of times when I'm doing edges like that, I use my marker. It's just easier for me. Um, and then this side, when you're doing this side, you have to make sure that it's not crooked, because now we've cut off the edge of this paper and this sticks out farther than this little trim here. So I really need to, in fact, I'm going to turn it this way. It's going to be easier for me to line that up on the edge of this trimmer, and so, and keep it straight. So I want to make sure that this is lined up. And there you go. This policy envelope somehow came out about a 1/16 of an inch longer than this one. So what I want to do is, instead of centering this on this one, I took my ruler and got the center and glued this on. This one I'm just going to glue on top of where this one is as best that I can, rather than finding the true center. And I'm just going to glue the very edges here, and then I'll have my belly bands. Alright, so I've also added a belly band here on this page that's underneath the waterfall fold out. And so this one was made in exactly the same way. It's just longer. So anyway, I have attached that here, and then on this side I have these mini roses from ReneaBouquets, and I've just added a little bit of that glitter paste on the edges, and then put a little of the eyelash trim underneath and glued them on to the center of these teardrops on the lace. All right, a few more things I want to go over, and the first being these photo mats. I cut the cardstock originally to 5 5/8 by 6 5/8. Then I used a medium corner punch to round the edges or the corners. And then before I added any design paper, I made sure that they fit into the pocket. So I had to check each mat with each pocket, because none of the pockets were exactly the same. Anyway, I just wanted to make sure that they slid out okay, top and bottom. So I ended up trimming quite a bit from there. So I think the photo mat ended up being 6.5 when all said and done on this one. And then I just wanted to make sure that the mat fit all the way in. The only thing peeking out is the lace. So once these were trimmed to size, then I had originally cut my design paper to 5 1/2 by 6 1/2, but of course I had to measure and resize the design paper. So this one ended up being 6 3/8 top and bottom. The design on here is what I originally printed out for the cover. I thought the imaging was too big. I had printed it out 8 1/2 by 11, but instead of scrapping it, I decided to use it here. And then on the back, I have this spider pattern, which unfortunately I glued upside down. This is from the Copper and Black Halloween collection from Digital Curio. So this one just slides in here like that. And I really wanted the lace instead of the tabs. I had tried the tabs. I didn't like the way it looked. And so I'm really happy that I used the lace to pull out my photo mats instead. On this one here, I've just used the same floral image, and on the back is this Alice with the Duchess, and I printed both of these 8 by 8 and then cut them to size. And then this is the same lace here. This is from ReneaBouquets, and I've used a lot of her embellishments, so I'll put a link to her shop below. And so that one slides right in there like that. Okay, so sometimes we just have to go with design over function, and that's the case with these little spiders here. Typically, if I have an opening like this, I'll use something that can be used as a pole. You can't grasp these little spiders to open this, this flap here. So anyway, I just use my finger like this, or I'll grab onto this trim that's on the tags inside and pull those up and pull these out like this. These images are from this Halloween tag sheet, and I printed this from Hoerth Studios. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. Anyways, that will be linked down below. And what I did is I cut a couple of the tags out, and then I traced one onto this Halloween floral pattern. And once I cut that out, then I cut out the center image from the original tag, and then I just glued it onto the top. So the same process with this one, only I didn't cut the image as small. I really didn't want to lose any of that imagery. And then this one was traced onto the spiderweb paper, and then as I cut the center piece out, I just cut that top off there, and I traced that onto this striped paper, and I cut two, one for the front and one for the back. And this paper on the back is from the Orange Gothic collection, and I just added or photoshopped in this spade overlay, and the overlay is from Digital Curio. I'm just not sure which collection it's from. And I had traced the tag onto this paper as well, and then I just glued the two papers back to back, and so it's a double layer thick tag, triple if you count this centerpiece here. I just wanted a sturdy tab because I wasn't using any of the black cardstock with this. This image I originally printed out for the cover in 4x4. Thought it was too small, so I didn't want it to go to waste, so I glued it onto the back of this spiderweb paper, and this just tucks into this spiderweb here. And this is a piece of chipboard from my stash that I just painted black, and then I added this glittered spider. Now for the photo mat, I chose this black cat paper from the Alice in Halloween, and I just love that. He's got the orange eyes. It's just really cute, spooky cute. And then on the other side I have this Halloween floral pattern, and so that one just sits in here like that. This cute little butterfly is from this image here, and I'm not sure which company I got this from, so make sure you check out the link below. And so I sized this image to 5x7, and I printed out two, and then I cut the same butterfly from each one, and then I just glued them back to back, and then I added a little bit of the glitter paste on the wings and in the center here, and then I just got a little bit of eyelash trim underneath. Then underneath the waterfall, I have these spider die cuts that I got years ago from Grapevine Studios. Alright, so here I have this photo mat, and this skeleton is from the Skull and Moth collection from Digital Curio, and I photoshopped him onto this paper from the Orange Gothic collection. When I printed it out, I printed 5x7 and then just trimmed it down to 4x6. And then this is the spade overlay paper here, and this was also printed to 8x8, and then I trimmed it to size, and the cardstock is 4 1/8 by 6 1/8, and I've just rounded the corners. This large tag here is sized 4x6 on the design paper. I cut two of those, And of course just hand trimmed the top and rounded the corners on the bottom. And then the cardstock is cut to 4 1/8 by 6 1/8, and I did the same thing there. And then I've just topped it with some eyelash trim. And then I cut out a coffin pattern, and then I traced it onto this Halloween floral paper, and then I attached it onto some black cardstock, and then I cut the cardstock by hand about 1/8 of an inch larger than the image. This paper here I created by using the spiderweb as the background and then photoshopping the Drink Me Alice on top, and I didn't size her very large so that I'd have enough room with the spiderweb paper to cut out any design that I needed, and I printed that out 5 by 7 and was able to cut this down to the small size and still have that Alice there large enough to see. Once this was cut out, then I glued it onto the other side of the coffin, and I've just added a little bit of tulle from the dollar store, and the lace and these mini black roses and this butterfly is from ReneaBouquets. Then I have this purple eyelash trim underneath the butterfly here. On the last photo mat, we have this Harlequin paper and this lace that I used on the very first pocket, and then on the back I have the Alice with Absalom, and this just came out so pretty. Loving those colors. And of course this just sets into the last pocket here. And that's it. So if you have any comments, I would love to hear. And if you have any questions, please do ask and in the comment section below. And you guys, thanks for hanging out with me and watching this tutorial. So if you would, I would love it if you'd give me that thumbs up or hit that like button. And also I'd love you to hit that notification bell so you can join me for my upcoming videos. And lastly, I appreciate your patience in my nail changes throughout the video. I have been soaking my nails in polish remover, and as I've been editing videos all day because well, I'm trying to kill 2 birds with 1 stone and trying to do more of this myself without having to spend so much money. So anyway, again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.